Well, good Monday, everyone. Welcome to another Mondays with Manny. I'm your host, Manny Rodriguez, and this, of course, is a live cast, and I do have a live audience with me. So thank you all for who's in attendance today. Really appreciate that. Mondays with Manny, of course, is about discussing common problems organizations face and how to deal with them using the science of behavior. Special thanks to Business Science Magazine, who sponsors this Mondays with Manny, 305 Publishing, the OBM Alliance, and of course, my teammates at Bueno Ventures. So today's topic is kind of interesting, I think. It's about creativity and creativity in the workplace in particular. In terms of how to generate ideas, how to reinforce and encourage people to be creative, and to use a title of a book that I'm going to be referencing a little bit, Making Ideas That Stick. Okay. So this topic came about because I was talking to some colleagues of mine and about some ideas that I had, and I was getting a lot of great feedback about some of them, and some feedback that said the other ones I should probably just lose. So not all ideas are great ideas, but the intention is that my colleagues and I, we generally encourage each other to be creative and think outside of the proverbial box, right? And inspire each other on ideas. So I thought this was kind of a novel topic because in today's workplace, especially with our climate in the world today, we have a lot of people doing different things to generate work and to be productive. And of course, we need people to think outside their proverbial box, especially if they're used to, maybe you're used to working in a different setting than you are today. So if, like most people in the world who are working from home, we have to be a little bit creative on how we do our work, how we are productive, how we work with teams, how we do all sorts of things. In other stances, people are used to working from home, or they're used to doing the job that they're doing today. Nothing's really changed for them, but organizations are striving for more, do better, do faster, do more efficient, etc. And sometimes doing different things requires a little bit of creativity. So I thought that was today's topic. I thought that would be really, really kind of a cool thing to do. So the first thing I wanted to do is actually start with the science. What does behavioral science teach us about the subject matter of creativity? And there was an article written back in 2006. It's been a while. But in 2006, for those in the live audience, I put it in the chat room for you. The title is called Behavior Analytic Contributions to the Study of Creativity by Rick Cabina, Rebecca Morrison, and David Lee. And they published this in the Journal of Creative Behavior, which I thought was kind of funny, back in 2006. So just out of curiosity, if you're in the chat room, go ahead and let me know if you've ever read that article. It's a pretty cool article. And if you haven't, that's okay. I might even be able to attach the article somehow in a little bit. All right, cool. So not a lot of people have read this article, mostly because it was published in a journal that a lot of people in our field of science don't read, right? And in the world of business, a lot of business professionals don't read this journal either. But one of the things that it talked about was how behavior analysis, what we investigate, right? When we investigate with this in the study of creativity, is the variables around novel behavior, right? So meaning creativity can simply be defined as new behavior, right? New thinking, new behavior of actions, anything that we're doing that's different than the way we were doing or thinking before. And so what we do in behavior analysis is we have to study, investigate all the variables that would influence people doing novel behavior, right? And oftentimes this is why we define it as being creative, because creativity is doing something different or thinking about something in a different way. So in short, what behavioral science teaches us is that the environment is what encourages this new thinking, this new behavior or creativity. So to be a little bit more scientific, so let me get my geek on for a minute. So what the authors talked about in this article was that there were specific environmental behavior relationships that produce such novel behavior, right? And those included the following. They included imitation. So you needed a model, right? Somebody who is creative or is already doing that novel behavior, they can be a model for you. Number two, instructions. So this could be textual or maybe some verbal rules or instructions that help you to be creative. So like with my children, for example, I always say, okay, here's a blank sheet of paper. I want you to tell me what comes to your mind when I say the word house? And I want them to think outside the box. And I say, draw me a house like no other house before. And so I give them rules to kind of become creative, right? Okay, so that's instructions. The third is variability. So variability, the way that they described it was variability in terms of reinforcement. In order to get this novel behavior of being creative, you need new levels of reinforcement. Being creative is not necessarily naturally reinforcing for people. In some cases, a lot of people find it very difficult to be creative. So keep that in mind. But variability is all about how do you maintain creativity? Well, it has to be variable reinforcement, right? And for behavior scientists, we know that there is a strong schedule of reinforcement that drives a great deal of behavior, right? And it starts with variability. So the next one is interconnection of repertoire. So what does that mean, right? That's a lot of scientific jargon there. What it generally means is that you get put in situations that require new behavior, but you anticipate the outcomes because it's similar work. Okay. So, for example, if you've ever been put in a team to do a project, in the past you've been on teams, you've done projects, and you've achieved an outcome, right? So maybe you got recognition, or maybe you got some rewards, or the project was had your name on it, right? You had authorship on it. Well, let's say you get put on a new project team. Maybe there's new project team members, and it's going to require you to do new things, but the expected outcome is pretty much the same, right? And so that's what they mean by interconnection of repertoires. You already have the repertoire of working with a team. You already have the repertoire of being creative in a team dynamic. It's just making you do something different than you've done before. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But interconnection of repertoires. And then last but not least, they talked about contingency adduction. Contingency adduction. So what does that mean? Well, essentially just means you are getting put in a situation with a new set of expectations and a new set of outcomes. So you're basically walking into a situation you don't know what to do. You're not really sure how it's going to end up, but that's all about being creative, right? So creative in the new behaviors and creative in terms of how you're going to execute. So pretty great stuff, right? So that's what behavioral science teaches us. So I thought it'd be really good right now. Now I'm going to take my geek hat off a little bit and I'm going to say, what does that look like in practice? So how do we encourage, reinforce, set up people to be creative? And the good news is there's a great deal of literature out there in the world of business, right? If you just Google how to encourage creativity, you're going to find a whole great set of things like, for example, and I'll post it in the chat room, it's an article out of Forbes magazine, Forbes.com, that talks about 15 ways leaders can promote creativity in the workplace. Go figure, right? So simple Google search, and you're going to find things like remove the limits, right? Remove limits or barriers to employees to being creative. Diversify your teams. Make sure you get teams that have a very diverse set of backgrounds and experiences. Stop saying the word but and start saying the word and. Like, we can do this and this, right? So that builds on creativity. They also talk about stop micromanaging, right? Don't focus on how people get the work done. Focus on let them figure out how to get it done, right? And that last bit ties to another point they make in the article in Forbes called Be Specific About the Objective, Not the How to Make it happen, right? So pretty cool stuff there. And I thought I'd throw in a couple of my own experiences around generating and encouraging creativity. So one was an activity that I did years ago with a client where we actually assigned people new assignments that they'd never done before. So they basically were put in a situation, right, that they've never experienced before, and we let them kind of freely figure out how to make it happen. So that was kind of a cool novelty situation. Another one that happens in teams is brainstorming exercises, right? So you put a team together. Have you ever been part of a brainstorming, folks, out there in the live audience? Brainstorming is kind of cool. There are no limits, right? There are no boundaries. So you set the team in motion to just basically brainstorm all sorts of things, and that's creativity. Working in teams, we already talked about that. Another one that I've done with companies is just simply ask employees for ideas. So you get like an idea bin or an idea box, and you say, hey, we're looking for ways to deliver goods and services in different novel ways. What ideas do you have? Right? So you just generate ideas from all the employees by simply asking them. And then last but not least, and I think this is true for a lot of the Silicon Valley companies, is they allow for creative time. So you have time for work, you have time for lunch, you also have time to be creative, right? So creative time is kind of a nice little bucket of time that organizations today are allowing employees to simply set aside time to just be creative. Pretty cool stuff, right? So, okay. So now that we have our creative thinking going and our creative juices are flowing, let's say we have a creative idea, right? So that's one problem organizations are facing today is encouraging creativity. So we've talked about that from a scientific perspective. But how do we as organizations, how do we make those ideas stick? And the good news is there's already literature out there for it, and it's based on some pretty good science. And the book that I really enjoyed is called Made to Stick. Made to Stick. And the subtitle is Why Some Ideas Survive and Others Die. The authors are Chip and Dan Heath. Um, it's a great book. I highly recommend everyone pick up this book. Um, and the interesting part of this book, okay, so the whole book is premised on the idea that there are ideas worth sustaining, right? There are ideas worth sticking, but how you go about generating those ideas and communicating those ideas to make them stick in people's minds and hearts, very, very, there are nuances to it. And so what they did brilliantly in this book is they came out with 6 qualities of an idea that is made to stick. So I'm going to simply share those 6 ideas and just encourage you all to grab the book. It's a great book. So the 6 ideas, well, first, let me make sure I put the book title right there in the chat room for my live audience there. Thank you. So the 6 qualities of an idea that is made to stick are as follows. Number 1, simple. The goal is to strip an idea to its very core. And what they mean by core is one single most important thing about the idea, right? So the single most important thing. And so that may sound easy in concept, but actually they point out the hardest part about that is weeding out all the unimportant aspects of the idea. So if you have an idea of how to like deliver a goods or service to a client or repurposing a procedure or maybe just doing the work differently, you have this great idea. That idea is probably filled with lots of ideas. It's not just like one thing. But if you have to communicate the idea, tip number 1 is make it simple by stripping it out to its core. What's the single most important thing about that idea? One of the things they also talk about with simplicity is the key to motivating others with your idea is to use the core as your message and help them to make a decision as how they apply your idea. So it's all about simplicity is all about a central core focus, one central thing of your idea that's the most important thing and how it's applicable. All right, so that's number 1. Number 2 is unexpected. So one of the first requirements that they talk about with in terms of communicating an idea is getting people's attention. The second is keeping their attention. And so one of the things that they talk about with communicating ideas is how to build in the unexpected part of communication. So for example, so one of the things that they do is outline three elements to this notion of being unexpected. The first is you identify the central message you need to communicate. The second is you figure out what is counterintuitive about the message. So you're essentially preparing yourself for that person in the room who's going to say, "Yeah, I don't agree with that. That doesn't make any sense." So you're going to use that to your advantage. And then number 3, you're going to communicate your message in a way that breaks your audience's guessing game, right? You're going to make them critically think about your idea and you're going to throw them off. You're going to do something that's a little bit unexpected. So a great way to see this in action is if you watch television and you watch commercials, mostly like automotive commercials, like the new cars and stuff, where they do something in the commercial that is totally unexpected. Like I saw one car commercial, I think it was like a Chevy commercial, but the cars in the commercial were everything but a Chevy. And then it wasn't until the end of the commercial that you saw the Chevy, right? And so it was like kind of unexpected, and it kind of threw you off, but it was very memorable, right? What they were trying to drive at. One of the things they also mentioned about unexpected is that doesn't mean to be gimmicky. You don't want to be gimmicky. You just want to show them information, share with them information, communicate your idea, but throw them off a little bit, right? So that's number 2. All right. Number three, concrete. So what they talk about is that when an idea becomes concrete, it means that it's being described to be used by the human senses, right? Sight, hear, taste, touch, right? So what this does is this illustrates the point that an idea that sticks is something that they can actually touch, hear, taste, smell, etc. What they also talked about in this part of the book is the curse of knowledge. So this simply illustrates that the curse of knowledge is like the main enemy of being concrete, meaning the more that I know, the more you're going to have to be very concrete about your idea. So, and that's really the main difference between an expert and a novice is their ability to either be abstract or be concrete. So, in your communication of your idea, the more concrete you are, the better you are. Number four, credible. So, credibility, of course, we know is very important, especially if we're talking about things that are scientific in nature. Now, one of the things that they really focus on with regards to ideas is what makes people believe ideas. What is it that makes people believe in an idea? And in short, it's credibility. So, how do we build in credibility into an idea? Well, the first thing that they talk about is we use it based on some authority figure, like our parents or tradition or experts, right? But what do we do when we don't have that level of authority? Well, they also give us some tips there. So I'll share with you those really quickly. First, you use an anti-authority, meaning you use somebody that's totally counter to the idea itself, right? An anti-authority. The second is you use more concrete details, right? So the more concrete, the better. And this actually is applicable to scientists in general because we want to be scientific and we want to use facts. So speaking of facts, the third thing they say is use statistics, right? Let the data be your guide in sharing the information. Number four, they talk about the Sinatra test. The Sinatra test is his old song, right? If I can make it there, I can make it anywhere, right? Anybody know the song? You should. I know somebody in this room should know that song very well. It's because they live in New York, right? So that's the Frank Sinatra test, right? So if I can make it there, I can make it anywhere. That's the whole point of credibility, right? And then last but not least, use testable credentials. So in many cases, we know that people that do presentations and share ideas, they also have credibility in regards to some professional certification of some sort, right? So that's a good way to show credibility. All right, so that's number four. Number five, emotional. Emotional. The goal of making a message emotional is not about making them cry or anything. It's really about making them care about the idea. So, what they talk about in the book is that people's emotions or their feelings about an idea really inspire them to act on that idea, right? So, if you want your idea to stick, you need to bring in some emotional component to it so that they care about it and they have a reason to act on it. Okay. And then last but not least is stories. Number six is stories. To make an idea stick, the authors are really telling people to build in stories to share your idea. And for many of you, if you've ever watched somebody present before, stories are really an exceptional way to share and communicate an idea. A lot of times, people remember the story, and that's what helps drive their action of the idea. So they talk about how stories are kind of like a mental simulation. So you basically are sharing a story that they can then associate with and understand what you're trying to get at, right? So the stories part of their six qualities, their six qualities of an idea to make it stick is really powerful, and that's how they end the book. So that's made to stick. And I thought that that was pretty powerful. In the book, they actually do talk about research studies for each one of those qualities and how they test those qualities out in practice. So it's pretty amazing stuff. All right, folks. So that is it for Mondays with Manny. I wanted to share some behavioral science where it comes to encouraging creativity, and I wanted to show some great material from the world of business and science on how to make those ideas stick. So I hope you enjoyed today's Mondays with Manny, and I will be sharing the links and all that stuff with folks in the live chat and also anyone that's watching the recording. Thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in another Monday. Take care.